Joining me now in studio is Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project, the former chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley. It's great to have you here to kind of walk through some of this stuff. It's really been a flurry of not only these executive actions, but now we're seeing, I think, 10 judges issuing rulings at least to halt some of what the president has been up to. On top of that, we're seeing these reports today that the Trump administration may not be following some of those rulings. So, in terms of following the rule of law, I mean, does that concern you in terms of what we're seeing so far?
President Trump campaigned on the fact that he is going to bring bold reforms to Washington, D.C., including implementing DOGE with Elon Musk and cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. And the American people gave President Trump a large electoral mandate, 312 electoral votes, all 7 swing states, and President Trump is doing exactly what he told the American people he was going to do.
We saw this polling actually from CBS News. Some of these moves, many of them are popular, more than 50% support, but I guess it's about how he's doing it, isn't it? Whether or not the president is kind of towing this line of the Constitution, whether he can do it unilaterally, or whether he needs the Congress to really sign off on this. Just taking one example, USAID, a government agency, many say, that needs congressional approval. Is that true?
Well, it was created by executive order. And I would say this about President Trump's actions at USAID. You have an activist judge on the D.C. District Court who told the President of the United States he could not have overseas Foreign Service officers return to the United States because 30 days was apparently too short for this judge. Well, that is not the judge's decision. That is the president's core power as the chief executive officer, his executive power under Article 2 of the Constitution, including his power as commander-in-chief. And this is a very dangerous precedent that a federal judge can tell the president of the United States he cannot have federal workers come home because it's too soon, according to this federal judge.
We've also seen President Trump, his vice president as well, kind of lashing out at judges who have halted or paused some of his agenda, suggesting they don't have the authority to do so. There was a recent post, I believe, on X by the vice president. He said if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. I mean, what happens if the Trump administration simply decides not to follow these rulings by federal judges?
Well, these judges are issuing lawless ex parte temporary restraining orders, and it's
But lawless in the eyes of whom?
Well, lawless in the eyes of the law. For example, if a USAID employee thinks that they were terminated for political reasons, there is recourse. They go to the Merit Systems Protection Board. If a
again, this is a pause, isn't it? So these freezes on hiring or the enforced kind of layoffs have been paused. They were told they can go back to work, and we're hearing people aren't even allowed in the building.
This is a radical assault by activist judges on the president's core powers under Article 2 of the Constitution. He is the commander-in-chief. He is the chief executive officer. He has the executive power under the Constitution, and these judges are trying to steal that executive power because they have policy and political disagreements with the duly elected president of the United States.
I mean, just taking Article 3, which is what your organization is named after, Article 3, Section 2 says the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, going on, but essentially referring, and this has been litigated in courts, Supreme Court cases, hasn't it? I'm sure you know this, but saying that essentially there is judicial review. That's what the courts are there to do. They're there to look at what the president's doing. Maybe you could call a judge an activist or not. That's getting political, but essentially that there is the power.
Yeah, there is judicial power to decide cases and controversies. They don't have the executive power. The executive power belongs to the president, and these activist judges like this Rhode Island U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell, who is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's buddy, who donated $500,000 to Democrats as being a politician in a robe in Rhode Island, right?
We've seen Republicans cheer similar moves by judges to block something that President Biden did. So is this just a political thing? Is this Republicans saying, hey, look, these are activist judges, these are Democrat judges? Is it just a matter of who's in the batter's box, for example?
No, because President Biden was illegally using legislative power, for example, when he issued an executive order to try to forgive student loans. That was after Congress declined to do it. He did it by executive fiat. That's legislative power. He wasn't using his executive power. What these judges are doing with President Trump is they are attacking his core executive branch power. He is the executive under Article 2, and these judges are trying to tell the president of the United States and his Treasury Secretary, for example, that they can't get into the payment system of the federal government and look for waste, fraud, and abuse. They're telling the president he can't recall foreign service officers serving abroad at USAID because 30 days is not long enough of a time for this judge in D.C. who has no idea what he's talking about. He's not the commander-in-chief. These judges need to stay in their lane.
Of course, these are all the judges responding to multiple lawsuits, not only brought by unions, but also by states, just to point that out. I want to ask you about maybe the most controversial move in terms of the Constitution. This was Trump's move to limit birthright citizenship. Many say it's explicitly laid out in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that, this is the law of the land. So why do you think then the president would choose to kind of go after something that is so clearly there in the Constitution? Is this, do you think, a playbook to get that directly to the Supreme Court?
Well, it's not clearly laid out in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution, the birthright citizenship provision was enacted to overturn the Dred Scott decision, where they tried to say that children of slaves were not natural-born citizens. And there has been a case about 100 years ago that has extended birthright citizenship to lawful residents who are here long-term, the Chinese.
I mean, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States.
The key is subject to the jurisdiction. And when you are here on a short-term basis, if you are here illegally, if you are an ambassador's family, even American Indians were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That was corrected by Congress.
Yeah, well, and these are all questions that will be laid out. Before I let you go, I mean, it's a really interesting time in this country because we're seeing, on the one hand, the president, his backers really pushing for an expansion, it seems, of executive power. And it looks like Congress is kind of ceding some of that legislative power. It's laid out in the Constitution. The intention was to have 3 equal branches of government. What do you think the fallout could be here if we see the executive branch really gain a lot more power?
Yeah, we have 3 equal branches of government that do 3 different things. The president has the executive power, Congress has the legislative power, and the federal courts have the judicial power. And what you're seeing are these activist judges trying to take away the president's executive power, and that is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court of the United States will step in, probably on the emergency docket, and strike down these rulings by these activist judges.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see at some point the Supreme Court begin to weigh in on some of these questions. Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project. Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.